Hello and welcome to Simon Says Artwork. In this video I'm going to be doing a sketchbook cover image on this sketchbook here. It's brand new, so I've got no drawings or anything inside, and I'm going to get an image on this front cover here, and I'll be using this Staedtler fine liner, which is and I'll be using this. And I'll be using this Unipin fine liner, which is 0.1, if you can see it there, to do an ink first drawing from imagination on this sketchbook cover. So okay, let's get started. Well, when it came to doing this cover art, the first thing that I had to consider was the vantage point of the camera. This means that whatever the position of the camera is, and by the camera I mean what the position of the viewer is going to be. What position is the character that I'm drawing going to be seen from? And as you can tell, my character is being seen from something which is above, looking down. That means that I have to consider how the head is going to be positioned and the rest of the limbs and everything else that I draw. It's the first thing that I think is important to really spend some time deciding before you do a drawing. Now, I didn't spend too much time doing it, but as soon as I started drawing the head, I knew that was the commitment that I'd made. I now have to draw this character based on this angle. And everything that I draw from this point onwards is being affected by this vantage point. Every perspective has to be affected by this angle that we're looking at. We're looking down on this character and we're on their right hand side. So we're looking across and to the right at this person. And it's the same for the television. That's what I'm drawing, is an old-fashioned television. It used to be designed like this. I know that televisions these days are flat. Some of my viewers won't be quite so young and will remember televisions like this. And I no longer have one, but it was only a few years ago that I had one, and I donated it to someone who was in need. And that was why I drew that, is I thought it would be quite a nice little design to include. And most of the other things that I draw on this surface are boxes and concepts and ideas, but they're not necessarily specific things like that television is. So I thought it would be quite nice to have a few things which you know what it is, and quite a few other things where you don't really know what it is that I'm drawing. But I'm drawing something. It's definitely a shape. I consider the design, and I try to add several details to make sure that the design is interesting. Things like buttons, and I always like to include things which I think will suggest texture and depth. That's why I talk about those things a lot in my videos. Now in this, I start to create designs based on a 3D shape, which I'll start to draw, and then I'll just run with the idea. This here is a kettle, so that's a real world product, but most of the other things will just be small objects and items that are either squares or almost letters which become 3D, so an L shape or a letter C or something like that, and then I'll just make that a 3D shape. I'll put some buttons on it, some ridges here and there, And so long as it follows the perspective, it looks more like some kind of an object or item. This thing which I'm drawing here could be considered to be a couch with the arms, and instead of a seat you've got some other kind of box with inserts, and then there's buttons on top. It no longer looks like a couch. That thing next to it which I'm drawing is a football. It's not a great football, but I thought so long as I think of a football and then I draw these different bars that go across horizontally and vertically, then it would be an interesting shape. And that's all I'm trying to do here, is create several different objects and items that can all balance around the main point of focus, which will be the character. Everything else is either wires or prongs or ideas for switches and buttons and dials. Just keeping those things in your head as options always helps to create design from imagination. Just off the top of your head, on a whim, creating things where you think, this will look interesting, I can put it on an angle, I can intermingle it with other things so that it's sat in relation to something else. You can even start to attach things one to the other. But it was just a free-for-all. This seems like a little bottle of drink, and I thought certain things should be around and at hand, things which could be creature comforts, bits of snacks, and just things which the person might like to eat or drink or use. But otherwise, just trying to think of anything and everything which could be cluttered around in this space. The cover of this sketchbook should be considered as something called the picture plane. The picture plane, as far as I understand the concept, is the surface on which you create artwork. So it could be a canvas, could be paper, could be fabric, or cardboard, and on this occasion it's the cover for the sketchbook. Now, once you have chosen your picture plane, it's up to you at how you create depth on that surface. There are several ways to do this, and the way that I've been discussing and showing here is to use perspective and a vantage point. And the idea is that the perspective dictates how everything shrinks and swells as it gets closer or further away from the viewer. And also I'm doing lots of different objects that overlap each other. So I'm drawing things in the foreground, then the midground, and then the background. This means that it creates a sense of depth because some things are obscured by other items. They go behind and you can't see them fully. That's something which I think can be quite useful to create depth and the illusion of a 3D space. That's the most effective way to use the picture plane, is to try to help the viewer suspend disbelief, to look at something and believe that everything has form and depth and texture. Trying to make certain things look bubbly and soft, other things look firm and rigid, some things look fragile, and other things look, strong and durable. Some things less organic than others. All these textures and forms are ways in which to create the illusion of an environment. And this was an exercise in imagination and creativity. Now, one of my viewers has mentioned that they appreciate the video going from a time-lapse to real-time video. And I've tried to inject it into this video, even though it's not the best use of it, but at least it gives a sense of how long it takes me to draw one of these objects. I don't give it much thought, I just go with an idea and then I try to run with it and justify it. The viewer is great support to this channel called Rick Smith, and they leave comments on a lot of my videos, and I really appreciate their opinion and their insight into what they've seen. It makes me think about how to improve the video and what actually resonates with the viewer. And that's important to me because I really would like to make these videos become improved over time. So as a little adjustment to this video, as I did have it edited, was that I adjusted from a fully time-lapsed video into this where you have the real-time drawing of this object here. So it's not an amazing use of it, but I'm doing my best to try to vary up the entertainment value and perhaps the educational value as well. Because this isn't sped up, you can see how long it takes to draw some of these objects. It's a 0.1 nib, so it's a fairly small nib, and it's just something where you draw a shape and you realise if that's the shape that I've started drawing and that's the perspective that I've been drawing so far, then it needs to follow those rules of shrinking and vanishing in that direction, and potentially I can add on to it here and there and create buttons and dials and wires and additional little bits and bobs to sell the idea of this being a unit with cables attached to what looks like a mask. And I didn't know how far it would go or what would be added to it until it was something which I decided on the spot. And you just try to use your intuition to ensure that you're trying to serve the drawing which you're doing at the time. By serve it, I just mean you're trying to really do it justice. Finish it how you think it feels, as though it looks right. So I'm just adding more bits of wires and overlapping cables just to add a little bit more of complexity to that area. I think if there's a mask that's going to be powered by some kind of a generator, it probably has several wires that move different elements of the face. But that was just a make-believe object. I've never had anything like that or really even considered it very much. It was just something which I thought maybe if I draw that now, then it will become something where I can imagine the reality of it. The cable shoots out of the other side of the mask, as you can see, and then maybe that's a plug where you insert it into a socket, and then some bits and pieces that are maybe part of this object. But it's all a little bit random. And then we go back to the time lapse, because there's a lot of things that I'm trying to draw on this surface, and if I did it all real time, we'd be here all day. It was quite a long time. I think all in all it was just over an hour that it took me to draw this front cover. So it's all an experiment, as I always say with most of my drawings. It's something where I thought, let's just do it and see what happens. If it's wrong, I can paint over it or something to try and cover the embarrassment of what I failed to do. But it turns out that I quite liked it. I thought it was fairly nice and interesting. There was bits that work better than others. Things like that, which I'm drawing there, is a paintbrush, and you can't really tell. If I didn't tell you what the ideas were, some of them are just very vague, and it's because I'm not adding too much details, like that's a little paint bucket with the handle upturned. This here, which I'm drawing, you'd never know what it is if I didn't tell you. Take a guess at what this is that I'm drawing now. Any ideas? It's hard to tell, but that's an actual real world thing that I've looked at and thought I'm going to draw that into here. Now that thing on the top right is a plant pot, but it's sort of a ceramic plant pot, and it's got little floral designs that go around it. You would never guess what that is, but it's got strange little wavy curves on the top part of it. It bulges out in the centre and then shrinks back in, and then it has a wavy thing for the base again, and that's what I tried to draw. Then everything else, there's bits of a tyre, bits of what we call a maiden over here, which is just a metal frame that we unfold and prop up to hang our washing on. There's an aerial, part of a hose, a bit of a bottle, just things where some of the things are actual items and others are just bits and bobs. things which would create clutter and an interesting shape and design. And then something which is quite nice afterwards is to go back in and add depth to the lines. So that's what I'm doing here, a dark edge to a lot of the objects. When you're not doing full shadow puddles and creating hatching, then it's nice to have a shadow edge on your line work. You can see already what it does. It just gives it that sense of depth. I had a bit of a pattern and design to this top. It's almost a Buddhist or Hare Krishna style of pattern. A few details to his trousers and then go back to the shadows. So I think it adds a heck of a lot to the different objects and items. And then bits under his arms and bits under the top, and nothing too much. There's no actual shadows being cast, but it's just enough where it makes the items look a bit more interesting. And that's as far as I go. Now, I think that's a good amount of objects to do in the time that I gave myself. It was quite a challenging idea to attempt. I think I'll probably try it again. Maybe the next time I'll try it with a brush pen or something which might be slightly easier than doing it with such a fine nib. Okay, that's the image done, and I think it's worked out pretty good. It's quite nice. It's got some complicated pieces here and there, and it's just quite a fun jumbled load of objects and items. I really enjoyed working my way through this. It was quite tricky to keep developing these ideas on the spot, but that does help you drawing from imagination and help you keep that muscle exercised of thinking on the spot, and keep you on your toes that way. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, then please leave a like, comment down below, subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell, and I will see you in the next video.